Good morning, ladies. It's really an honor to be here. Claudia did a great job introducing me. As I was preparing for this, I talked to a Teresian that all of you know, or most of you know, a good friend Robin Hebert. And I said, well, what do I need to know to be able to talk to this group of women to St. Therese and spirituality? And so we had a great discussion. And so from that discussion, I came up with my own Teresian starter kit, which I brought today. If I was going to start a Teresians group, first of all, most importantly, you have to have a copy of the Story of a Soul, which actually I forgot mine, so I borrowed this from Crossroads. So please show mercy to me. I will return it. I promise I'm not going to take it. So to be able to study the works of St. Therese, very important. The second thing, very important, scented candle. Can't have a Teresians meeting without a scented candle in the middle. This is from Christmas. It's Fraser fir. I don't know if that really will fit, but it is a scented candle. And finally, she said, most importantly, you have to have your box of Kleenex. So we cry. So anyhow, it's really great. We're not going to use any of those today. Maybe a little St. Therese. Talking to you today about the theme of mercy during this wonderful Jubilee of Mercy. And the topic of showing God's mercy to our children. You know, I get a lot of people, particularly mothers and wives, coming to me so concerned about their kids. They try to do their best to raise them in the faith, but they see that they've left the church, if they got to college or gotten a little bit older, or they're worried that they are going to leave the church when they get older or leave the practice of the faith. And so I've been now for almost 6 years at Our Lady of Wisdom with the tremendous blessing of working with college students. Over the years, worked with literally thousands of young people who have passed through the doors of Our Lady of Wisdom. And I've seen a lot of them, and some of them I see here who've come through wisdom over the course of the years, have their faith just blossom and grow in a very genuine and real way. But the truth is, I've seen others really struggle with their faith, and they often fall away. Some come back, some don't. And it's often very difficult to be able to reach out and minister to them and to bring the love of Christ to them. But what I want to do today is focus on how to be merciful to our children, but specifically how to be merciful to young women. It's how we can speak to and show mercy to young women so that they have a pretty good chance of either staying in the faith or coming back to the faith if they've left it. And a lot of what we're going to talk about, or at least towards the end, is how to plant those seeds so that the faith can grow, that when they get older, the faith will blossom. Now, this is something that I'm sure most of you know, and something that St. Therese was aware of. She wrote about it in one of her letters, is that women tend to be more open to Christianity and the practice of the faith than men. How many of you are going to disagree with that? No, disagree. No one will disagree with that. If you do, I'm going to kick you out. No, it's true. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. So this weekend, we're having our 4th annual Greek retreat. We do this retreat for fraternities and sororities, most from UL, but they come from about 8 different universities. We have about 170 of them on retreat right now, so please pray for them. Pray for me. I'm going to hear their confessions this evening. I really need the prayers. So every year it's the same. I walked in, they're all getting ready. There are 170 students signed up. Guess how many are boys? About 40. So I walk in, and I just don't understand it. You have 130 of the most beautiful, intelligent, motivated women, perfect wives, and there are only 40 guys who signed up. I would have joined the fraternity just to go to that retreat when I was in college. And then, even better, they're all the boys are at 2 tables, talking to each other. They're not talking to the girls. So what is this, 7th grade dance? What is going on here? They don't learn. Now that's a whole different topic. It's the talk I'll give to the fathers. I just don't get it. They're idiots. But anyhow. just because girls and young women tend to be more open to the faith doesn't mean they don't struggle. I see a lot of young women struggle in real ways. A little different in the ways guys tend to struggle with their faith, but it's real, it's authentic, and it's something that needs to be addressed, and these women, these young women in particular, need ministry. So again, there's a large group. I didn't know how many I'd be speaking to, but if you could think about it, take a moment. What do you think is the main issue that causes women, particularly young women, to struggle with the faith? This main issue. And again, I'm not going to take a show of hands or anything, but during my time and working with hundreds of young women personally through spiritual direction and confession and whatnot, I've seen that there's a thread that runs through 98% of them. If they do struggle to live their faith, to live a moral life, to love Christ. And that thread is, and it's not going to come as a surprise to any of you, I'll give it to you and you can tell me if you got it right. You can raise your hand. Is that these women, the thing that causes them to struggle with their faith is seeing themselves as unloved or unlovable. Self-image issues. How many of you thought of that before I said it? Raise your hand. There are a hand of you. Look at that. It's true. The main issue that young women struggle with, and sometimes older women too, is they see themselves as unloved or unlovable or unworthy of being loved. Does that resonate with you all, ladies? Shake your hand if it does. Does it make sense? All right, it does. Hopefully I'm on the right point here. And what it does is it causes these self-image issues. It can cause some severe personal problems in their lives that often spill over to relationships, into the area of morality, and ultimately into the area of faith and belief in God. But I'm not here to really harp on that. Instead, I'm here during this year of mercy to share some good news. And the work that I've done or that we've seen with these young women who had such tremendous struggles that over time and through God's grace, I've seen really significant transformations. Where these young women have come to see themselves as loved and as lovable and changed their lives and changed and deepened their faith. So what I want to present to you today is a message of hope, of how this can be, and it has been done, it can be done, and how we can engage this in a much more authentic and effective way. So what I want to do is I want to share a handful of stories first. Now, what I've done is I've changed the names, I've changed the details, I've changed a lot of things to be able to sort of protect the innocent. But I think these stories are going to resonate with you. It could be a lot of young women or even older women that you know or you've met during your life. The first one we'll call Sarah. And Sarah is a young woman who really struggled in a significant way with sexual promiscuity. Not talking about sleeping occasionally with a boyfriend, but multiple partners over an extended period of time. And whenever I encounter a woman like that or a young woman like that, the first question I always ask is, have you ever been abused, particularly sexually? And of course, Sarah had been abused. Some pretty terrible abuse by a male family member. Along with that, just sort of chaos in her family. A very violent, abusive, alcoholic father. And so what Sarah was doing, from a young age, she was told she was not lovable. This abuse is what it tells women, is that they're not worthy of love. They should be used. And so she saw herself as sort of dirty and filthy. But she wanted to be loved. And what she did is she began that pattern at a very, very young age of looking for love in men who abused her, who didn't treat her with respect. And she did it over and over and over again. And even though in her mind she knew what she was doing, it was like she couldn't help it. She kept dating one douchebag after the other, one abusive loser after the other. That's how it was. And finally, and she just had terrible guilt and shame, which just heaped on already this terrible self-image. She didn't hate God. She wanted to believe in God, but she kept coming back to confession and counseling and just felt miserable. But finally, through some intervention, we were able to get her the counseling she needed and the therapy she needed, and to begin working with some spiritual direction. And it was in prayer and healing. It was a very, very long road, but ultimately enabled her to see herself differently, and then to get in a relationship with a really, really great guy, a believer, someone who loved her, respected her, and they had this chaste relationship. And at the beginning, she kept telling herself, I'm not worthy of this. I'm going to bring him down. I'm terrible. I'm sexually promiscuous. But she began to see herself as loved and lovable through this relationship. And they've had a healthy dating relationship ever since. Another young woman, we'll call her Claire. This is sort of a funny story. Claire, at a very, very young age, was sick. Lots of different physical ailments that made it that she couldn't have a lot of friends when she was growing up. She didn't get to go to all the parties and play in the sports and be in all the clubs. And so she grew up to be very, very introverted and shy. But as a lot of young women or young men who grow up very sick, they have a real sweet nature to themselves, but so shy and so introverted, and really never saw herself as beautiful and as worthy of love. Not in the same way, but she just sort of was underdeveloped in that. And she began to go through really terrible anxiety because as she got older in college, she saw all of her friends getting boyfriends and going to dates and having fun, and she was sort of left by herself. And of course, when all your friends are out and you're sitting alone in the dorm room, you're feeling pretty miserable. And you begin to hate yourself more and, eating to cope and all these different types of things. And so we began to talk. And, I like to ask questions, and I'm sometimes direct. And I said, well, is there a boy that you like? And she said, there is a boy that she likes. I said, well, did you ever think about asking him to the Christmas dance, the Valentine's dance? We do dances at Wisdom. Oh, no, I don't want to ask him because I'm too shy. I said, does he even know that you like him? And he doesn't even recognize me. I said, well, why don't you do something to make him recognize you? And she's like, what would I do? I said, all right. I said, I'm not like Mr., beauty makeover, but you're a really pretty girl. Where do you get your hair done? And she said, I go to Supercuts. I said, all right, well, I know one thing. That's not the place you need to get your hair cut. I can get my hair cut there. I'm a guy. Supercuts or Pro Cuts, wherever it is. You can't go there. So I said, here's my suggestion. Where do you shop? Well, I go shopping with my mom. I said, you're 21 years old. You can't shop with your mom anymore. Don't you have friends you go shopping with and y'all go buy a little sassy dress or something? Well, no. I said, listen, so what it is. So I set her up with some people that I know, some of the students who, like to put things in their hair and look sassy and all that, and to have an extreme makeover. And it was wonderful to see the confidence that she got, because she's really a cute girl. Now, whether or not the boy responded, we still have yet to find that out. But still, the little makeup, the friend showing her attention, taking her shopping, going and spending 5 hours getting their hair done, whatever that is, meant a lot. Not only for her own self-image, but there was someone willing to spend that time. A friend who cared about her and saw the inner beauty and was willing to work with her to bring it out. The final story is a young woman we'll call Elizabeth. Elizabeth was basically an adopted child. Didn't really know her parents. And grew up in an adopted family. They more or less treated her well, but she really questioned her identity, where she was from. And as a lot of adopted children sometimes can have those really identity issues, questioned who she was. As a kid, she was picked on a lot. She really didn't get along and didn't have any friends. And so began to have self-image issues, struggled a little bit with gender identity, had some eating disorders, and even some self-mutilation. And so she went to college from a different city, didn't really know a lot of people, as a lot of young men and women who come to college do. While she was there, one of her dorm mates invited her to say, hey, come to Mass over at Our Lady of Wisdom. And she'd really never gone to church much before. She grew up Catholic, but not very, very devout, and came. And after Mass, it was the beginning of the semester, we had our big back-to-school bash with food and music and all of this, and began to make some new friends. And then, gradually, over time, making these friends, coming to Mass, receiving the sacraments, getting involved in prayer groups and retreats, and all the things in the girls' groups that we do for our students, began to see a tremendous transformation. Not just in her because she was hanging out doing church stuff, but they would go to sports and concerts and festivals together. And this group of friends that she never had, this family in a sense that gave her identity, brought about a tremendous transformation. So she's got really, really great grades. She's doing well in school and is very, very strong in her faith. And it's because of that one student who chose to invite her to get involved in the community. So I could give you a lot of other stories, some probably more complex, but in looking at all those stories, we have some similar elements. We have young women who are good. They wanted to do the right thing, but mostly because of things that happened when they were younger, they found it very, very difficult to see themselves as loved or lovable. And as a result, it sort of parlayed into their life, whether it be their moral life or the expression of their faith or their social life. Most of it came from stuff that happened in the family of origins. But what happened, though, the key thing is how did these young women come to see themselves as loved and lovable, and therefore be able to have a renewed self-image, which has led them to see themselves as more loved and lovable by God and welcomed into the church? It came through another person who chose to see them and love them and welcome them, whether it be their friends, whether it be the church community, or whether it even be the priest. That's the key. The love that they came through another person. But it wasn't just human love. They saw it, and I've seen so many young people see it, is God loving them through the other person. Because this is ultimately what we're talking about. We're not just talking about some pure psychological issue of someone who's going through the struggle of not being loved or not seeing themselves as lovable on a human level. Yeah, that's true. But as I said, the way it connects to the crisis of faith, that if it's not dealt with, they begin to say, well, if no one else loves me, God doesn't love me. And the way to make that connection, the way to find the healing, is that when we understand when others love us, it is God loving us through them. Through our family, through our friends, through our church community. Because so often I see young women like this, or older women, or even men pray, God, I want to know your love. Show me your love. And they're waiting, like while they're on their knees, for some grace dust to descend, or Jesus with the divine mercy and shooting rays out of his hands and his heart. Maybe he'll do that. Maybe you'll get these deep spiritual warm fuzzies in prayer, and many of us have had those consolations. But 9 times out of 10, the Lord wants to show us his love through other people. But we don't pay attention because we're waiting for this to happen, and the Lord's saying, look at all the people that I put around you to show you that I love you, but we don't pay attention. Many of you know the writings of Father Jacques Philippe. We have some of his books in the back. Father Jacques Philippe has this wonderful quote that I talk about all the time and I use in talks. He says, we urgently need the mediation of another's eyes to love ourselves and accept ourselves. The eyes may be those of a parent, a friend, a spiritual director, but above all, they are those of God our Father. The look in his eyes is the purest, truest, tenderest, most loving, and most hope-filled in the world. There's a deep truth there. Is that when others love us, or when we can see ourselves as loved by others, we need to see the Lord looking at us and loving us and affirming us and building us up. When we're able to do that, we're able not only to grow in a greater self-human dignity and have a better self-image, we're better aware of how the Lord loves us and grows deeper in our faith. If the young women that I mentioned maybe had encountered those people who loved them, their faith would have begun to crumble even more because of the shame that comes from sexual immorality. And quite often a person who's involved in that will begin to justify their own behavior and say, well, the Bible is wrong or the church is wrong. I should be able to do what I want to do. And they kick in anger against the church. Or someone who's very sick and shy begin to blame God. Well, if I wasn't sick when I was young, I'd have been healthier and I had better friends. It's all God's fault. Beginning to cast the blame on God for the way their life turned out. Or even the young woman I mentioned before, who was adopted. So very easy, because they don't know the love of God, the Father, can get caught up into all these different things of destroying their own body, of hating themselves because they see themselves as unlovable. And if you do hate the body, it's going to be very, very difficult to really understand the message of Christian love and the way the body communicates the love of the Father and the love of Christ. So it's this, when it comes to campus ministry, or when it comes to any sort of ministry to young women, that is so crucial. Guys are a little different. I think a lot of the times I see women say, well, there are these guys, and my husband who's fallen away from the church, or my son, I just pray that the Lord can touch his heart and show him the love and tenderness that he has for him. So that generally doesn't work for guys. Guys need to have their heads crushed or smashed against the sidewalk for them to pay attention. The love, tenderness, affirmation thing, it's good. That usually doesn't elicit conversion in guys. But it is very effective for women, particularly young women. And so that's where we want to go a little bit deeper in looking at this. For me, I think this is the reason that Catholic campus ministry, whether it be at UL or whether it be at a different university, is so important during this year of mercy and beyond this year of mercy to minister, or being able to minister to young women. Because so many of them, we're not talking less than half, from my experience more than half, deal with those self-image issues, and to some degree see themselves as unloved or unlovable. And they get to college, and when their personality sort of really begins to be set in, and they make choices that affect the rest of their lives, they're often making it starting from this position that they're unloved or unlovable. And the decisions you make with that are usually not very healthy ones. So when they're there, because of the ministers, because of the community, because of the friends that we have there, it's a safe haven where they can come to experience the love. Because there are a lot of places, as you may know, on college campuses or where college students go that claim to be places where they can find friendship and love and communion. But the reality is those are simply fake and false and bring a person down more. One of the things that I tell people all the time, and sort of connected to this, the most important thing for a college student to keep their faith through college and to be able to keep it even after college, without a doubt, I can say this universally, is for them to do that, they have to have good, solid, virtuous, loving friends. Friendship and relationship. The most important thing, particularly for young women. Young men too, but particularly for young women. If you do not have good friends and a good community that affirm you, that builds you up, where you feel welcomed and loved, you can forget about it. I've seen a lot of kids who are good, high school, involved in campus ministry, making good grades. They come to college and they want to do their own thing. They taste freedom for the first time. And what they do is they get involved with the wrong group of friends, and it begins to spiral down. So I'll see them. They'll come to me for confession or counseling, and they'll talk about all the crazy things they've been doing, the drinking, the partying, the drugging, the sex, whatever. And the question that I'll normally ask first is, who are you doing it with? You're not going out doing it by yourself. Adults drink and party by themselves. Young people don't. It's true. It's true. They don't. I said, are these friends who are your church friends, the ones that you pray with? No, they're not. They're my friends from high school. They're my friends from the sorority. They're my friends from the whatever club. And because they're hanging around with them, it begins to spiral down. And it's hard because they love their friends. They don't want to seem as big judgmental to their friends. But I talked about this yesterday. We're in Lent and we're fasting. I said sometimes the best fast you can make is from certain relationships. Certain relationships. The ones that bring you down. So if you have an abusive relationship, whether it be emotionally or mentally or physically, take a fast, a permanent fast from that relationship. Or at least put some very severe boundaries. If you have a bunch of friends who every time you're with them, you're falling into grave sin and doing stupid things, you're not judging them, but you got to fast from them. It's a decision that Christians have to make. And particularly, if you're with a boy or a girl and you cannot control yourselves. I'm not talking about falling into weakness every once in a while, but every week falling into it. Why not think about fasting from that relationship? I thought I was going to get stoned after Mass. But I love my boyfriend. I love my girlfriend. You may love them, but they may not be the right person for you. If you can't control yourself. If that friend, if that community, that relationship is bringing you down. But it's hard. So often, young people, particularly young women, want to be loved and accepted so much, they'll put up with a cheap imitation of it instead of allowing God to love them through authentic, healthy relationships. And so it's not just the friendship they get, but as I said, it's the love and acceptance where God mediates and communicates that and builds them up as sons and daughters of God. A person who has good friends, who has a good community, who has a good relationship, and is aware that these are not just friends, but this is God using these people to communicate love and give thanks for it and see them as themselves as their friend sees them, things can be transformed. But so often the difficulty is they've been told so long, or they've told themselves the lie so long that they're unlovable, they don't want to believe it. Oh, these people really don't care about me. Oh, they're not really my friends. Oh, they really wouldn't want to do that. Quit believing the lie. Allow the light of Christ to shine on you and shatter that darkness and shatter those lies. The Lord is using the person in front of you to tell you how precious and valuable you are. But all of this points to the bigger, more complex, more thorny issue. And it's the one that I think probably a lot of us don't want to talk about. Why is it that so many young women do not see themselves as loved or capable of being loved in a wholesome, healthy, and holy way today? Now, there's one thing, I learned this before I got to Our Lady of Wisdom. I learned this before I became a priest. Girls are complex. I'm not going to try to figure them out. There's a lot going on. Guys, pretty simple. You feed us, you let us have a nap sometimes and watch football. We're pretty cool. All right? I'm a little bit more complex. So I can't say that there's one clear reason. There's one clear thing that leads to this. I think there are a lot of things. A big one, as you know, or I'm sure you've read about, is the image of the woman and the image of love that our society promotes, or they see in television and media, where they're told, you need to look like this, or be like this, or act like this in order to be loved. Or they see these relationships in movies and music. Oh, this is what it's really like, and they go and search for this, and it's completely unrealistic. And so indeed, the media does, and society does, give this image of what love is and what someone needs to be, what they need to look like, how they have to act to be accepted. Another big thing is what we're talking about, is the peer pressure that comes from friends, from other young people, students, and what they are told or how they feel they're supposed to act around these people or what they need to do in order to receive attention or affirmation. And now, as a result of social media, there's even more pressure that young people are able to put on each other about the standards or the way that they should act or what they need to do to be accepted or to be loved. But those things are important, but there's one that I think we all know is the most important. The most decisive factor of whether or not a young woman is going to come to know herself as loved and lovable, or doubting her own self-worth and her own self-value and whether or not she's loved or lovable. Anybody care to guess what that is? The family. I heard it there amongst a lot of different things. We'll get to some of the other ones. It's the family. This is where it all starts. This is where the seeds are planted. And so if you see the young person or the child is clay. It's in the family that those initial movements are going to be made to form the pot, whether it's going to be strong or weak. Whether it's going to be sturdy and able to carry love and water, or it's going to fall apart. It is in the family. And so this would warrant a whole different talk, which we don't have time for today. But it shows us the importance of the family, of the home, of being a place where children can feel loved, accepted, no turmoil, there's peace, where they can be formed to be loved and lovable in the image and likeness of God. There's no family in here who's perfect. There's no family who makes no mistakes. There's no family that doesn't have a certain level of dysfunction. But some are more dysfunctional than others. Some are more problematic than others. And I'm not casting blame. I'm not judging. I'm just simply stating a fact. And as a result, because of these problems, most of the issues that young women face can be traced to that. Whenever we do marriage prep for couples, both for guys and girls, we spend a long period of time on family of origins. Tell me about what your family was like. Your parents together or divorced? Was there dysfunction? Was there drug or alcohol addiction? Was there a prayer life? Were you raised in the faith? Was there any abuse? Were there any psychological, emotional, or mental issues? We're not trying to place blame here, but we've got to be able to know what the roots are if we're going to be able to find a solution. If we're going to be able to bring the healing balm necessary to help the young person know they're loved and lovable, or else the cycle continues to repeat itself. They end up dating someone like their parents. They end up reliving that same drama, that same turmoil, and it passes on to their children, and it gets even worse. But there is the chance to be able to break that cycle by helping people understand that they are loved as children of God. I can look at a young person who I know has a healthy self-image, who has a deep faith, who has a great sense of self-worth, and almost bet you that they come from a good family. Not a perfect family, but a good family. A family where, to some degree, they felt loved, accepted, affirmed, where the faith was important. They came to know God's love for them, Christ's love for them, through the love of their mother and father and brothers and sisters. Again, no family is perfect. I'm not here to condemn anybody. I'm not here to say that I grew up in a perfect family. I didn't. No one does. But the ones who are rooted in Christ, I can spot them. I know what they look like, where the faith is important and it's lived, and children are affirmed and built up and have a sense of joy and love and self-worth, produce the most well-balanced children. Again, I'm going to give you a perfect example of that. Who is one of the most well-balanced saints in the history of the church? One saint that you would love to hang around with. Who? Saint Therese. Saint Therese. And Saint Therese came from a very loving family. But was it a perfect family? No. Saint Therese had some serious issues with her mom's basic mental breakdown, having to go live with the nanny or the wet nurse for the first year. It caused a lot of anxiety. But because of the love that she received from her father, and that tenderness and that care, and of course the grace that she received on that Christmas Eve, and plus the love of God, she was transformed. Therese didn't have that family, even with its imperfections and the struggles that they had. particularly with some of the daughters who really struggled towards the end, St. Therese probably wouldn't have been what she was today. God's grace is there, but it builds on nature. And what a powerful example the Martin family is. And we're so blessed to have Louis and Zélie as professed, canonized saints of the Church. That gives you an example of a family, even though they have struggles and trials, can still produce some very, very holy children. So the talk, here, we're not going to talk about all the things that need to go into making a family holy. We don't have time. I've talked about that before. But I'm going to give you 3 points that I think are essential for a family to create that environment where the child, particularly the young woman, grows up feeling loved and affirmed. Doesn't mean she may not have her own personal psychological issues. Doesn't mean they're not going to be struggles. Doesn't mean she's going to be St. Therese. Wouldn't you all love to have a St. Therese growing up? That is not the case. The first is, the faith has got to be lived in a life-giving way. Not oppressive. Not as an obligation. Not as, we're a Catholic family because we go to Mass on Sundays. We usually get there a couple of minutes late and we leave right after communion because we don't want to miss the opening kickoff of the Saints game. That's not genuine lived faith. It's not genuine lived faith. Faith has to be something that is where they learn to pray, where they learn to love, where the faith animates everything they do. Is it a difficult task? Yes. When I go and I talk, particularly to young men, but sometimes young women, about vocations, and the fact that why young people are not responding to calls to vocations they used to be, I always ask them, this is at Catholic schools. How many of your parents, come hell or high water, now and through your life, brought you to Mass every Sunday? Less than 25% is the average. How many of you, out of a group of a whole family, pray the rosary as a family, do devotions as a family? Usually it's 1 to 2%. 1 to 2%. These are the Catholic schools. So the faith is a practical atheism people are grown up in. How can you expect people to know the love of God if you don't show them God's love when you're growing up? If you're too busy running to dance and ballet and sports and all these things which are not bad, but you come home and there's no time for faith. Our faith is on Sunday, you dump them off at catechism. The faith lived in a genuine way that animates everything we do. I had a young woman come to me just the other day, and she's really been getting more involved in her faith because of a retreat she went on last semester. And I asked her, I said, what was the turning point for you? And she said, Father, all my years growing up and even through Catholic school, they taught us all the faith, but they never taught us how to pray. When I got here, I learned how to pray. So she learned how to do it. She started praying, and things started becoming different. She began waking up to how God showed His love to her through other people. That has to happen in the family. Number 2, an accepting, regenerating, merciful love. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, or I could have used another talk on, is that along with this lack of sort of feeling loved in young women, sort of along with that, I see this very harsh perfectionism in young women. Women have to be perfect. They have to do the right thing. These tremendously high standards. And why is it? Either because their parents demanded it on them, or they figured they had to live up to that to be able to earn the love of their parents, or earn the love of their friends. And so it creates a lot of neuroses, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and a lot of struggle. And so that shows, though, when they grew up, they didn't receive that love. They did expect the best from them and challenged them, but said, you know what? When you fall, when you make mistakes, I'm still going to love you. And the fact that their weakness can become a path to holiness rather than an obstacle. This is the heart, as I'm sure most of you know, of St. Therese's little way. The little way is not primarily about doing small things with love. It's not. It's about accepting one's own weakness and fallenness. Loving the Lord, but knowing that when you fall because you're a little child, God the Father is not there to curse you out or condemn you, but to lift you up. And so that we, knowing that, with that knowledge of God's love, don't run away from Him, but run towards Him. So often in talking to particularly young women who fall in deep ways, who have this perfectionism, whether they fall morally or in school or whatever. They feel like that child who cuts themselves after the parents said, don't play with the scissors. And they're sitting there bleeding, and they're fearful, waiting for the dad to come in. They think the dad's going to chew them out. But no father does that. No father comes and says, I'm going to let you bleed, you little turd. I don't say that. They say, all right, we're going to deal with what you did later, but let me care for your wound. God the Father is the same way. So when we fall and we're weak, God is not there to punish us and beat us down. He wants to show us mercy. And so we need to run to Him. This is the brilliance of St. Therese. Where did Therese learn it? She learned it from her family. She learned it from her father. She learned it from her sisters. That merciful love that does want the best, but it's not too harsh. Boy, oh boy, moms can be harsh on their daughters. I'm not saying you don't have expectations, but to show mercy, to accept weakness, to learn the way of St. Therese, and help them find peace through that. And third and finally, and gosh, this may be probably the most important, and this is the most difficult issue because it's out of the control of most everyone in here. It may seem that the role of the mother is important, but the most important thing for a young woman to know that she is loved and lovable is the role of and the importance of her father, her dad. No doubt. No doubt at all. For the boy too, but really for the daughter. Again, I know it's for a lot of you ladies in here. You are married, but your husband doesn't go to church. Your husband doesn't pray. I pray in private. I want to do all that stuff, that religious stuff. In the name of God. And I'm not saying he's a bad man. That unwillingness, that inability to show love to his children, particularly his daughter. To say, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, not just in his words, but his deeds. And again, every father is going to do it differently, but that father affirming his daughter, loving his daughter, building her up, gives her a tremendous dignity. Tremendous dignity. And also, she begins to say, I want to marry someone like Dad. Not someone who's a loser. Not some cheap substitute. Someone who is going to care for me, who's going to love me, who's going to respect me. The father has the crucial role. Why? Because he is the one who demonstrates or channels in a real way the love of the father. So often when I see young people, men and women, who struggle with atheism and don't believe in God. I think of one young person who came to me, I don't believe in God, Father. Well, why not? Because of science and logic. I said, please tell me your logical point why you don't believe in God. And he goes and rambles on and said, my man, you're not making any sense at all. I said, let me ask you a question. Tell me about your dad. And he began to tell me, his parents divorced, dad really not present. I said, son, you don't need a philosophy textbook, you need a psychotherapist is what you need. You got some daddy wounds, put some Neosporin on that. It's true. We don't have that love that images and reflects God the Father, or our Father's too oppressive or too absent. That parlays to God's presence. And it impacts our own image and the way we see the Lord. And so, but this is the reality. A lot of y'all don't have that, or a lot of children don't have it. And we can start, and that's part of what I want to say, is these things are crucial, particularly for you who are starting families or still have children. Put these elements together, and there are other elements, to begin realizing that the formation really starts when they're young, for these young women and young men to know that they're loved and lovable as they grow older. But what happens? We all realize we're not perfect. We can't do it all well. What do we do? How do we prevent our children from losing their faith? And that's where those college years become the most important. Where young people and young women begin to act in freedom for the first time. They don't have anyone watching over them. And they're able to choose to believe because they want to choose to believe. Or they have the chance to take real ownership of their faith. That's what makes wisdom so great. No one is ever forced to go to wisdom. You go to wisdom because you want to go to wisdom. You want to go because you want to worship. No one's forcing you to do that. And it has a whole different dynamism It's not like going to church with a bunch of zombies, you know. I mean, if I was not a Catholic and I went to most Catholic churches, everyone just sitting there like that, staring into space and looking to get out. But yet, then I would travel to go to like a football game and see the energy. I said, this is obviously the God they worship, because they hate being over there. But if you go to a church where people enjoy being there, where there's a community, where they love God and they know the love of God, it has a profound impact. And so on a college campus, the campus ministry is crucial. I hate to say the last chance, but important chance of helping young people and young women know God's love. Some of you may be old enough to know or remember the phrase in loco parentis, the Latin, in loco parentis. You used to hear that before the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It means in place of a parent, or in place of the parent. Is that college and universities, dorms, dorm mothers, whatever, used to act in the place of the parent. The parent couldn't be there. I'm sending you away to college, but I'm going to expect that college and its administration to act like parents, in the place of the parents. Why? Because the parent wants their kid to be safe. I hear this all the time. I'm so worried about my kid going to college. I want them to have a home away from home. I want to have a place where they're safe and they can be formed and they can be fed and they can have a community. The truth is, on college campuses today, the only real places doing that is campus ministry. The fraternities are not doing that. The sororities are not doing that. The dorms, particularly the co-ed dorms, sure as heck aren't doing that. And colleges changed their mind. They're about teaching, not so much about formation. And so campus ministry becomes so important. It's the only place, I think, that you're going to find in loco parentis, the home away from home. And I can tell you from my experience at UL, we've done our best, or my time, but the previous pastors, including Father Steve, who was here for Wisdom in many years in the 80s and 90s, have made Wisdom into what it is today. A home away from home. A place where children can be safe. And I can tell you from my own testimony, we'll begin wrapping up with this, the impact it has had on me as a priest. You know, priests, we call ourselves Father, or people call us Father. And after a while, it's very easy just to sort of use that as any kind of title. It doesn't really mean anything. Particularly at a normal parish, where you're a father, yeah, but you're mostly an administrator. Because people don't live at the parish. They go there on Sundays. They get to encounter you for about 15 minutes when you're preaching your homily, and they come when they need masses said. The parish is not a place of life. It's not a home away from home for people. But at Wisdom, on college campuses, it is. So, for good or for bad, I live with the students. And as I have been there and have gotten old enough, I have realized that I am living a fatherly role. And because now, I've been there for 6 years, a lot of the kids are old enough to be my children. A few weeks ago, a young man came up to me and said, "Father, I'd like to sign up for a spiritual direction." I said, "Sure, what's your name?" And he told me his name, and I said, "Yeah, I recognize that name." He goes, "Yeah, you used to date my mom." And I said, "I did. I did." That's how you know as a priest you're getting old. Or older. So what's happened, though, is I begin to realize how things have changed. And that the students don't see me as like the priest, because they get there at 7, they leave at 11, and we live together, we do so many things together. I come to be seen as almost the dad. In fact, there are a number of students who call me dad, or pops, or whatever. And people ask me, "Father, what is your most profound experience of that?" It was a couple of years ago, and we had homecoming, the glitter comment. And after homecoming, in the big gym where they put together the float, all the glitter was everywhere. All the wood and cardboard and garbage everywhere. So I got up at Mass, and this was the homecoming was Saturday, this was Mass on Tuesday. I said, "Listen, y'all, all that garbage is in that hall." I said, "We have a dinner on Friday night. If that stuff is not cleaned up, or even worse, I see Mr. Wayne, the maintenance man, clean it up, I'm going to LMS. I'm going to lose my stuff. Do you understand me?" I said, "I want this cleaned up by tomorrow." So I said, "All right, I'm not going to say anything." So I've gone through the days, not cleaned up. Next morning I get there. All the crap is still there, and Mr. Wayne's cleaning it up. And, I felt the switch go off. I walked into the office. I said, "Get me so-and-so on the phone." She was the one in charge, and they could tell I was mad. "Well, Father, she can't talk to you. She has laryngitis." "She doesn't need to talk. She needs to listen." I read her the riot act. She actually saved it and played it at senior night. She thought it was funny. But my thirst for blood was not enough. So I went in and found the second in charge and said, "You, come here." And so, and I realized I'm channeling my own father. I sat in the hall and I said, "Before I say anything, I want you to know I am not mad at you. I am mad at the situation." So she's like this. We walk into the hall and I said, "Look at all this. Why is this bleep not cleaned up?" And I said, "Listen, young lady, this better be cleaned up. By the end of the day, there'll be no Christmas dance, no Valentine's dance. Do you understand me?" She started crying and, "Yes, Father." So I leave. A half an hour later, 30 students came from nowhere. And it was all clean. In fact, the head one came with a toothbrush cleaning the stuff off. But I felt bad. And I went to her the next day. And as Claudia said, I'm a Star Wars fan, so I had a little Darth Vader. And I brought it and I gave her Darth Vader. She says, "Father, why are you doing this?" I said, "You got to experience the dark side of the Force yesterday." I said, I'm really, really sorry. And she says, "No, you were just being Dad." And it hit me. She said, "You were just being Dad. When we leave crap around the house, my dad yells at me all the time. But if I did that at a normal parish, the bishop would have gotten phone calls." So it's that experience of not only being Dad, but it's a different relation. I love my kids. I'm mad at them sometimes, but I enjoy being with them. I try to be merciful to them, try to help them. And I'm proud of them when they go on to get married. I'm doing 16 weddings this year. That's going to drive me crazy. It's a lot of them. I don't even know I'm marrying this year. Or to see the guys go on to become priests, or to see the women become sisters, or go on to be missionaries, or get jobs. It has a tremendous impact on my priesthood, which has made me realize not only who I am as father and as dad, but more importantly, the role of effective campus ministry on acting as a place of the parent, a home away from home, where students can experience, not just through me, but for the ministers and through other people, the faculty and staff are involved there, through their students and their peers, the love of God, and see themselves as loved. Now, like any father, I probably don't tell them I love them enough. I probably don't tell them I'm proud enough. But it's really true. It's had an impact on me, and that's the impact of campus ministry. So, during this year of mercy, I'm going to give you 3 takeaways. 3 takeaways from all of this. The first, and you already know what these are. The first is, if we, during this year of mercy, we want to show mercy to our children, particularly we've talked about in relationship to young women, the importance of knowing ourselves as loved and lovable. Because if you don't know it, ladies, you're not going to be able to show it to your daughters or your sons. To say, you know what are the areas I need to work on? Where are those areas that I don't feel loved or lovable? Do not be afraid to seek therapy or counseling. Do not be afraid to work on that. The worst thing you could do is start blaming other people. Or to say, it's not me, I don't have the problem, so-and-so has the problem. That's the worst thing you can do. To be able to say, you know what, I do have an issue. A lot of the reason I act is because of lies I tell about myself that I'm not loved or lovable. And it's a lie. A lot of the fruit of our actions come from that. Get the healing you need. Do the work you need to do. Number 2 is the importance of the family and the family of origins. And again, this is scary, and I'm not trying to be mean or demanding. But the impact that you have on your children as they're growing up from an early age, they can sense if you love them by what you say, what you do, the way you act, the way you behave. You're going to lose your temper sometimes, but they're going to understand it if they know that you're doing it out of genuine concern for them. They'll be forgiving. To create that home, as we talked about, where the plant can grow, where the pot can be formed properly. It's a great, great, great responsibility. And I know a lot of you may be single moms or don't have a dad that's involved. Do what you can. Do your best. The Lord sees your goodwill, and He's going to give you the grace. Don't be too hard on yourselves. And third and finally, be supportive of Catholic campus ministry. I would say most importantly at UL, but wherever your children go. When you're sending your kids to the college, find out, do they have a good Catholic campus ministry? Is there a home away from home? What is the priest like? I'd actually ask if they have focus or Bible studies or things like that. And if they don't, say, well, maybe we want to think of another campus. So don't presume just because they're going to a Catholic school or college, they have that. Do not presume that at all. So be interested in that. Pray for Catholic campus ministry. And here's the last thing, and you'll know this. College students cannot support a campus ministry. They can't. Maybe if they spend less money on beer and coffee, they might support it a little bit, but they can't. We depend on the assistance, prayer and financial assistance of alumni, of benefactors, of people who care about Catholic campus ministry. It doesn't need to be a big gift, it can be any kind of gift, to be able to do what we do. And it does have an impact. One of the best things that happened to us last year, we did our first class gift. And I think there's some of the students here from that class. The kids who graduated, they were most involved. They all committed a pledge for 5 years. That class, there were about 20 students who pledged, maybe a little bit more. They pledged $26,000 over the course of 5 years. Because they saw what they received, and they saw others supported it. And so it is crucial. You want to know how to support Catholic campus ministry? You can come talk to me. You can visit our website. A part of what I do is I have to. I'm a father asking to support their children, doing what I got to do. People get mad, father's asking for money. No, father's trying to support his children and give them what they need. I'm a dad, I have to do that. And sometimes the dad has to work, and sometimes he gets embarrassed doing it. But we have a great ministry, and it's not without the great help of a lot of people. So, know yourself as loved, love your children, support Catholic campus ministry. Hope you have a great year of mercy and a great conference. Thanks for the prayers. I'm praying for you, ladies. God bless.